As soon as I landed at the airport, one of my bosses met me and said, hey, just so you know, as a warning, hey, there's a certain person coming to visit our unit, or basically home at the DMZ. And he called him DV Tango. I was like, who? DV Tango? Like, I didn't know what that meant. Mm-hmm. But he said, yeah, President Trump. So now former President Trump. So I had about a month to get my bearings and understand the landscape, start planning and then executing this big visit, this high profile visit.
Probably the highest profile visit.
Yeah. So I want to say in a way I got lucky because like I hit the ground running and I was forced to learn very quickly, but also a very interesting mission to start out with.
Welcome to Cherie's Corner, a podcast where we delve into careers and change and learn from the wisdom and lessons from my friends and guests so that we can enrich our lives together. I'm your host, Cherie, and I'm currently a business school student at Stanford University. Previously, I used to have roles in big tech and venture capital. In this very first podcast of Cherie's Corner, I invited my friend and classmate, Jae Yu. We talk about his career in the military before coming to Stanford's business school, being deployed in Afghanistan, serving in South Korea, and for being one of the main organizers for former President Trump's visit to North Korea. Jae was a dual admit to Harvard Business School and Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and he talks us through his decision-making and how he eventually chose Stanford. Let's get started.
Wow, I'm honored to be the first one.
I'm so happy you're here. I'm so excited for you to be here specifically because not only are you a dear, dear classmate, but also a wonderful friend of mine.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Let's do it!
Let's do it.
Okay, hopefully you don't see my slippers in the shot.
Well, my name is Jae. I was born in South Korea, but I immigrated to the United States when I was 3 months old. And I grew up in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey, for all my life. I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point, which was only 45 minutes away from where I grew up. Then I spent the last 9 years in the United States Army. My most recent assignment before the GSB was stationed back where I was born in South Korea. I spent 2 years on the DMZ there and then 1 year in Seoul. And then I came to the GSB.
Was it weird having grown up on the East Coast and then gone to West Point in New York, having to have more of like an international experience, being deployed in South Korea? I know you were deployed in Hawaii and also many other places.
I think growing up in New Jersey for basically my whole childhood and then going to a school only 45 minutes away, I was kind of in this little bubble. And it wasn't until I graduated from West Point and then my first duty station was Fort Benning, Georgia. So I went to the South and lived there for a year for the first time and went through some training there. And then afterwards, I was stationed in Hawaii, did a deployment to Afghanistan, went back to the East Coast to Washington, D.C. area, and then went to South Korea. Those experiences really opened my eyes to like, what else is out there? Mm-hmm. And there's a whole world out there. The one to Afghanistan was a combat deployment. It was a higher intensity in that the mission really was life or death. Our mission was to prevent high-profile attacks in the city of Kabul, Afghanistan. We were seeing that the Taliban and ISIS were sending in suicide bombers into the city of Kabul to destabilize the government, which they thought was propped up by the United States. They would try to commit these mass atrocities to decrease the support from the local people from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And our mission was to try to prevent those. So it was very high stakes, which also made it very high pressure and high stress. And contrasting that to my deployment to Korea, where it's more of a peacekeeping mission. Each assignment was very different in that way. One common thread amongst all those assignments was that I learned a lot. Mm-hmm. I worked with great, amazing people, and it really broadened my perspective. Putting myself in positions where it is uncomfortable, but it will broaden my perspective because I think that's where you learn and grow the most.
How do you think your experiences in the military have shaped you most recently?
Having experienced some stressful moments puts things into perspective. Having those previous experiences in the military just give me this vantage point of knowing what really matters and what doesn't.
I was in corporate before. We had a bug in our code. It's not life or death. And you have to pause and remind yourself. I mean, I have to pause and remind myself. Did you talk about your military experience in your application? To what degree? And what are some of the stories that you shared?
Stanford Business School has the infamous what matters most to and why. It was actually a moment when I was the company commander, meaning I was in charge of about 90 US soldiers on the DMZ. So before that, it was all male soldiers. When I was in command, when I was in charge, we had the first female infantry soldier come to our unit. And that was because 2 years earlier, the Army made the decision to allow female infantry soldiers. It took 2 years for female soldiers to go through the training progression. And then we finally had the first sergeant to show up to the unit. When we got word that we were going to have a female infantry soldier come to our unit, there was a lot of chatter, especially, in an all-male organization. And I asked my staff, hey, what do you guys think? And what position should we give her? Because it's better to talk about it than just passively let it happen. The initial response and the feedback that I got was not positive. And I think that pinched me because it didn't feel right. And I was in a leadership position where I had the decision-making authority of where to put this female soldier. Even though my staff and some of my teammates advised me to not put her in a consequential position because in a way they believed that she was going to get washed out.
What does that mean?
I didn't believe that she would make it, that she would be successful in the unit. And after I received that feedback, I thought about it and decided to put her in a team leader position, which was the most consequential position that I could put her of her rank into that unit. And the reason why I decided to do that was because, number one, if she was a trailblazer and the first female infantry soldier to get stationed at the DMZ, she already proved to the world, to the United States Army and to me that she has what it takes. Number two, I think in order to break the precedent, the culture of some of the sexism that exists in the United States military, I knew that leaders that have the decision-making authority would have to make those hard decisions, even though in hindsight, it shouldn't have been a hard decision. And I think it was within 2 weeks, she proved to everyone that she had what it takes to do what was necessary. And I think that set the tone for the rest of the company and the rest of the unit's history.
I can't imagine that your team was happy with that decision when it first came out.
Especially, when I'm not around or behind my back, they were saying, that was a bad decision, or she doesn't belong here, or she doesn't have what it takes to make it. But she did prove them wrong. And hopefully, even if it changed just one person's mind, whether it's like a junior soldier who will spend the next 20, 30 years of his or her life in the military, then maybe that one instance will then have a real effect and change his decisions for the future. So it was a step in the right direction, and hopefully there are more steps headed towards that direction. The reason why I included that story in my essay was because in a broader concept, I do believe the military should be a meritocracy, and it shouldn't matter what gender you are, what sexual orientation you are, what race, ethnicity, what socioeconomic status you grew up in. If you have what it takes to meet the standards and to serve your country honorably, then you deserve it. And you deserve to be put in those consequential positions. What you look like shouldn't matter. It should be what you can do and how you can lead and impact others.
I'm getting emotional. Well, I feel like this is the right time to say thank you for your service. Thank you for your service.
No, it's my pleasure.
And I feel very lucky to know you, and also have more faith that there are people in positions of power who have this mindset and who are also impacting people who are developing and will hopefully grow and also have this mindset, which is, like you said, a step in the right direction.
Yeah. So I do think it's very important that some of the classes that we take at Stanford talk about this, because if you're passive and you just let it happen, sometimes we'll miss it. And there are even times where we can go backwards.
The last thing I want to talk about around this topic was more of your experience in the DMZ. And I know this is a story that you've mentioned to me before, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about coordinating a certain person's visit to the DMZ. Yeah.
So in May 2019, I graduated from the Marine Corps Expeditionary Warfare School. And my next assignment after that, I volunteered to go to the DMZ of the Korean Peninsula. The DMZ was not a very desirable location to serve. It's very austere. There's no Starbucks on base. It's a unique mission set. I saw it in the kind of like the job listings, and I was like, I was born in Korea, never lived there, and what a great opportunity to serve the country that I was born in, but also the country that I currently serve with. And as soon as I landed at the airport, one of my bosses met me and said, "Hey, just so you know, as a warning, hey, there's a certain person coming to visit our unit, or basically home at the DMZ." And he called him DV Tango. I was like, who? DV Tango? Like, I didn't know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, yeah, President Trump. So now former President Trump. So I had about a month to get my bearings and understand the landscape, start planning and then executing this big visit, this high profile visit.
Probably the highest profile visit.
Yeah. So I want to say in a way I got lucky because like I hit the ground running and I was forced to learn very quickly, but also a very interesting mission to start out with. So, and then at the time, I'm still a captain in the United States Army, and I was a captain back then too. And captains are not necessarily the ones who are the main operations planner for an infantry battalion. But at the time, there was a gap in our organization. There was no major, which is one rank above captain, that filling that lead operations planner role. So it was a teammate of mine who was also a captain that we had to step up and fill that gap. And we became the lead planners for this visit because we really needed a perfect plan to execute this high profile visit.
Yeah. In terms of like itinerary, safety, what other things did you have to figure out?
Yeah. So we had to work with many different agencies. So we had to work with the White House staff, the Secret Service, and then multiply everything by 2 because we had to work with the South Korean side. So they call it the Blue House, but their Secret Service, Department of State, just so many different organizations and agencies that you quickly had to learn about, but also know who's in charge of what and how to coordinate and make sure that everything's in sync. The itinerary, security, minute by minute sequence, what are the contingency plans, what are the medical evacuation plans
in case like something were to happen.
Yeah, because you always got to plan for the worst case scenario. So for 3.5 weeks, I worked on this one visit and we had a great plan. We worked with some amazing people, different agencies, and we rehearsed the plan. Thanks to our team, like we had a very solid plan and we were all feeling very confident. June 28th, we did our final rehearsal and I was sitting outside my boss's office for one final sync. And then I go on Twitter to check the news and I see that former President Trump tweeted to Kim Jong-un, "Hey, I'm going to be, at the DMZ tomorrow. If you want to meet up, like, let me know." I found out when the world found out that the President of the United States had reached out to Kim Jong-un. And a couple hours later, I found myself driving the vehicle with my boss, the U.S. representative to North Korea at the time, Stephen Biegun, and one other person.
And this was not part of the plan.
This was not part of the plan.
President Trump at the time was supposed to meet with the South Korean officials and government.
Yeah. So he was supposed to do other things, but not necessarily go up to the very line.
Was he supposed to meet Kim Jong-un?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, he was not supposed to. After that tweet, the plan changed. So that night, a couple hours later, we found ourselves driving into North Korea so that the U.S. representative to North Korea could meet with his counterpart and basically do the initial logistics planning for what's to come the next day. And I remember, in North Korea, sitting there in the vehicle and just looking at the North Korean guards, and there were many of them, just thinking, wow, this is not something that I thought I would be doing, my first month assigned to the DMZ. But after that meeting, we drove back and the 2 people outside of our organization, they get on a helicopter, go back to Seoul. And then the following morning, we hold another meeting, this time on the South Korean side, to finalize the logistics for what's to come in 2 hours. We decide on how many security personnel are going to be on each side, whether we're going to have weapons or not, how it's going to go down minute by minute. We slap the table and 2 hours later, President Trump and some of his cabinet members are landing at the helicopter landing zone. And then we executed the plan that we prepared for over a month, but then really refined and changed in the last 12 hours leading up to that actual visit. That visit really taught me a couple things, but I think the biggest one was you really need to understand the landscape to really accomplish the mission. There were so many moving pieces and moving players and moving organizations. You have to understand the interlocutors and who are the important players. And then you also have to understand like how does that organization function and work and who makes those decisions. And it was a really eye-opening experience, and I'm grateful because I learned so much.
Yeah. Well, one of my professors, Joel Peterson, one thing he says is that you always have to have a plan, but your plan is written in pencil.
Yeah.
Like things can change, and the best leaders are adaptable to that change. And the fact that you ramped up in like 3 weeks is insane, because in a corporate cushy tech job, it's like it takes 6 to 8 months to ramp up. Meanwhile, like there's a lot at stake for your role and the work that you did. In the military, we have a common phrase, no plan survives first contact. Contact meaning like when you have that first engagement with the enemy. Ooh, that's an intense way of saying it. But it's true. Like you have this master plan, and then as soon as, it comes into play, like it has to change, it evolves. My philosophy is you always want to have a plan and have something to go in with, because it's easier to adjust than start from scratch. But just know as a leader or as a member of the team that you have to remain flexible, because no plan goes without change. True. Yeah. Changing gears a little bit back to the MBA experience. I'm very fortunate to know that I will be going back to West Point, my alma mater, to teach economics to cadets. And it's something that I've known for a while, even before I even applied to MBA programs. I first applied to go back and teach at West Point. And I've always wanted to do this because as a cadet myself, I looked up to my instructors, and I just saw myself following their footsteps. Since 2012, I've had this goal of wanting to go back and teach at West Point. In order to teach, you need a master's degree at a minimum. And then they gave me the green light to apply to MBA programs. So after graduating from Stanford, I'll go straight to West Point. And then over the summer, I'll go through the new instructor orientation program where they will teach me how to teach. And I'll teach my first semester teaching the basic economics course to the cadets. If you were able to choose any master's program, why MBA versus a master's in education or anything else? Yeah, I thought about this a lot before actually applying to the MBA programs. I weighed the pros and cons of like a master's in public policy versus a master's in business administration. And they're very different flavors. And the reason why I decided to go with an MBA is because with my long-term goals of wanting to serve in the United States Army for as long as I can and lead soldiers, the MBA does a better job of making you into a better manager, a better leader, and more well-rounded. And I think Stanford's GSB has a good, well-rounded program in that you do have some quantitative classes, but you also have the qualitative classes where you learn about different leadership styles or you role play tough situations. So when I looked through the course catalog and looked at what does each program offer, I thought the MBA was a better fit for my long-term goals. Which other schools did you end up applying to? Yeah, I applied to Stanford and Harvard, round one. Those were my top 2 target schools. And I knew that if I didn't get into my top 2 target schools, then I would have round 2 to apply to other programs. I do think there's some strategy involved, but luckily I knew that the military was going to fund my MBA. And if I could get into one of my top 2 target schools, then I would go to one of those 2. How did you end up choosing the GSB? It was a tough decision. I think... Did you visit both schools? I actually only visited HBS. I never saw Stanford until I stepped foot for orientation week. Okay, I'd love to know what went through that. Yeah. When I was a cadet and saw myself coming back to teach at West Point, 2 of my instructors went to HBS, and I looked up to them and I wanted to, follow their footsteps. But I thought I was a better fit for HBS, just looking at their student demographics. HBS, yeah, because they do have a, I think, bigger veteran network. So initially I thought I was a better fit for HBS, more so than GSB. But when I had to make the decision, I went back to some of my values of what would make me into a better leader in the future and what is going to broaden my perspective. And I thought the GSB, with its culture, its class size being smaller,
And it also being on the West Coast versus
like West Coast.
Yeah, it was like I might as well. My wife and I, we were like, we've grown up on the East Coast. We don't know what the West Coast is like, and we can't say we like it or don't like it because we've never experienced it. So we decided let's try this out. And I think GSB and HBS are very different in many ways. I think the culture is very different.
Yeah.
I can't really speak to HBS because I'm not a student there. But I think GSB, because it's a smaller student size, I think that plays a large part in creating the culture.
And I think at that point, it's also knowing a lot about yourself and in like what are the environments in which you would thrive, and knowing that like a smaller class size is probably better for you, your personality, your learning style, whatever, is a good thing to know. If someone's going through the application process now, what is one piece of advice you would give them?
Ooh, that's a good question. Applicants put a lot of pressure on themselves because they think that the school that they get into or get rejected from will define who they are, when that's not true at all. And I think, and hindsight's 2020, but I think the MBA program should be seen as just one step in the overall journey, and it shouldn't define who you are as a person. And I think just knowing that and just being confident that this MBA program is not going to define who you are, what you will accomplish in life, will alleviate some of that pressure and will then be beneficial for you in the long term.
I think that's a very mature point of view, having more confidence in your own self-worth. But people watching this might look at you and be like, yeah, sure, you're a dual admin. Easy for you to say. So then talking about plans, if it was your plan to get into these schools and, if it's written in pencil, what if you didn't get in? How would you have possibly pivoted your life to still go after your goals? Would you have applied again? Would you have adjusted course?
Yeah, because I had already gotten accepted to go back and teach at West Point. I had to go to graduate school in the year that I started, or in this past year, I had to go. And I think if I hadn't gotten accepted into Stanford or Harvard, I would have applied to other schools and I would have basically widened the net. But I think that's why it's so important to plan ahead and to start early, because if you have more time and flexibility, you can really put in a lot of time and effort into your target schools. I will say each MBA program's application process is a little bit different. So you just don't want to copy paste, because you want to personalize everything and personalize it not only to yourself, but also to the school. So I think the more time and bandwidth you have to dedicate to each individual school, the better your chances.
Smart. What is your top favorite class that you've taken so far?
I think hands down, my favorite class so far is Interpersonal Dynamics, or otherwise known as Touchy-Feely. Probably the most famous class at Stanford Business School. And it is a class where you work on how to build relationships, not only in the workplace, but personal relationships, professional relationships, how to connect with others. My class was only on Tuesdays, once a week, and it's essentially 7 hours long. The first half of the class, you are going through lectures, learning about different frameworks, going through different readings. And then the second half of the class, you and your T group, otherwise known as training group, you sit in a circle for about 4 hours, and there's no agenda, there's no hierarchy, and you basically put into practice what you just learned in the lecture.
I'm taking the class in the winter of next year. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
But for people who are watching this, who are just what is this woo-woo class that Stanford is teaching? You sit in a circle and talk about your feelings. Why do you think this class is so popular? And why do you think it's important for leaders and future leaders to have the skills that you're learning in this class?
Yeah, I think it has real life impact in that it can help you form better connections with some of the closest people around you. For instance, it really helped me better connect with my wife, who is also my best friend and, my number one. And there are only a few classes, I would argue, anywhere in the world that can really have those tangible, life-changing benefits. It teaches you how to form deeper connections, which, that's what life's all about, right? Yes, these classes on finance or accounting, they're important for professional reasons, but this class in particular focuses on building deeper connections. At the end of the day, like you are going to retire one day and say goodbye to your professional career, but ideally you have, family and friends still around you. And if you build those deep connections, those will last a lifetime.
I'm stoked to take that class. But speaking of your wonderful wife, well, the question was, what is your relationship with that?
I'm married.
And how has life been at the GSB as a married person, as someone who has a partner on campus with them?
I think the experience can vary a lot depending on your relationship status. So my wife, Jenny, and I, we got married in May. So it was only a couple months of marriage before we got thrown into this, this MBA program.
This social experiment.
Yeah, it really is a social experiment. The transition was pretty difficult. Just so much change. And there's so many shiny objects that just draws your attention that sometimes I forgot what was important. And it took me a couple months to really realize that above this MBA program, above even my career and anything else, like my wife is the most important. You want to make sure that you have a strong foundation first before you start going out and meeting new people, making new friendships.
Adding all these other variables into it.
Right. After this first year, we now have like a routine. We cook dinner together every Wednesday night. We spend a lot of time together, and I think we feel more comfortable. And living off campus was a deliberate decision for us. Living off campus also gave us some personal space, gave us our privacy, because when we go home, there's no other MBA student who's going to ask you, hey, did you get an internship yet? Or what are you super rounding? So when I go home, it's really me and her. And I think that's important.
What are your summer plans?
Since I know what I'll be doing after GSB, I'm going to be an economics instructor. So I am sharpening my skills so that I can be a good instructor. But I am not doing an internship because I don't plan on pivoting. I plan on staying in the Army for the long term and using this time to really spend quality time with my wife. So we are traveling a lot. We're golfing a lot. When we first started dating, she gave me 10 years to beat her in golf.
Has it happened yet?
It happened yesterday.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
We played at Stanford. And I beat her for the first time.
Wow. And that's also saying something because Jenny is very good at golf.
She's good. Jenny got a hole in one about a month ago. Yeah. So she's pretty good. But yeah, we play a lot of golf. And it's a hobby that we share. She got me into it. And now I think I'm addicted.
This next segment is called Hot or Not.
Okay.
And I will read out a couple of GSB things to you, and you will tell us whether it is hot or not. So hot here doesn't have anything to do with looks. Hot is favorable, popular, trending. Not is less favorable, outdated, less important. So these are some famous GSB terms or classes, etc. And you're going to say hot or not. Okay. This first one, I think I know the answer. Touchy-feely.
Yep.
Hot. We have a class called Data and Decisions, which is mostly like coding based and learning about statistics.
I'm going to give it a hot.
A hot?
Yeah.
You like data and decisions?
I think it's important as like future business leaders. Like data drives decisions and you have to at least understand like the basics. I've taken stats courses before, but some of the programs we used, that was new to me and it was interesting.
Nerd. Strategy management.
Ooh, strategy management. I would say hot. Yeah.
You like the class?
I liked the new teaching style, like the new method of role playing. Something I never did at undergrad, so it was a new experience for me, and I think it's an effective way for some people to learn, and I think it's a good segue into some of the other courses that are similar to managerial skills.
Case study method.
I think sometimes.
That wasn't allowed.
I think for cold, I will say, or not hot. Not. I would say it's just so repetitive. It might then lose its flavor. But I think there are some cases that are worth reading into and learning about. And then hypothetically putting yourself as a decision maker. And then what would you do if you were in their shoes? So
then flipped classroom.
I'm going to say not. And that's because I took accelerated finance and I don't know if I learned much.
Are you going to use the flipped classroom method when you're teaching at West Point?
Maybe. We'll see.
Your students are going to see that.
Yeah. Hopefully not.
Okay. View from the top.
Oh, hot.
Hot.
Yeah.
Global study trips.
Hot. I went to Vietnam, and not only did I learn a lot about a country I've never been to before, but it was a great way to meet new classmates that I hadn't met before. And it's run by MBA 2s, and it was a really good trip all around.
Mm-hmm.
It was both.
There's like 30 people on the trip?
About 30, yeah. It's both academic but also fun, and it's a great way to learn about a new country you haven't been to.
Talk.
Yeah, definitely hot.
Yeah. Preschool trips.
Preschool trips. I want to say hot because I helped run one. It was the Korea one. I was living in Korea, and young Darren, Hannah, and I, we helped organize the Korea pre-GSB trip. And those friendships, because it was some of the first friendships we made, it was very strong. We are still close to today.
Mm-hmm. What is the hesitation?
The hesitation is that some trips may form cliques later on. So we just have to be mature and have an open mindset and not deliberately become cliquish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think that's smart. Like the social dynamics of business school, which we haven't really talked about in this podcast or this conversation, but it is something that, like I said, social experiment. Yeah. Are we in high school? I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it.
Yeah.
The administration.
I'm going to say hot because I think it's a hard task that they have. And, GSB is one of the top MBA programs, and it wouldn't have gotten there without, the people who run it. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to give them some credit. I know there are some things that they could be doing better, but, but that's with any program, right? Mm-hmm.
GSB foam parties.
I've never been.
What the?
I've never been to a foam.
You've been to zero
foams. But I plan on going more next year.
Do you have a foam pass?
No.
Okay.
And that's probably why.
Yeah.
But I think we'll do it next year.
Okay.
So to be determined.
I want to see you at Foam Vegas, both you and Jenny.
We plan on being there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. This one is called Bills. How are you funding the MBA? Because there's a lot of different expenses. Yeah. There's tuition, there's housing, there's travel, there's personal stuff.
Yeah. Just one color.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
that was easy.
So it's all one color.
I'm in a very unique position in that this program is funded by the United States Army because they hired me to go back and teach at West Point, and this is part of the contract in that I will go get my MBA fully funded, and while I am a student, I also get my paycheck as an officer in the United States Army. In return, I owe the Army 3 days of service every day that I'm in grad school. So in return, I owe time. I
guess this would also fall under like the bucket of like employee sponsorship for business school.
Yeah.
Next segment is expensible or extravagant. What are things that you can expense and what are things that you cannot expense given your background in your specific industry, which is the military? First thing, first class flights.
No.
Extravagant.
Because the military is funded with taxpayers' dollars, we have to minimize the cost and definitely can't fly business class or first class.
Economy all the way.
And I think that's the right call because we are public servants.
Team building activities like escape rooms or like hangouts for the people that you're working with.
I think, and we do this a lot in the military, we do have those as expenses because I think it's so important to building the right type of culture that you want in an organization.
Cool. Meals.
I think it depends. And I think in the military, when you are, in a training environment, or like, let's say, we say go to the field, meaning like you go, train in the woods. Yeah, those meals are covered. But outside of that, meals are out of your paycheck.
Work-related technologies like a smartwatch.
If it's work-related, yes. The military has all sorts of gadgets, but personal gadgets, you have to pay out of your own pocket. But if it's work-related, you do get gadgets that you can use for work.
Professional development courses.
I'm going to say yes, because we have classes, training all the time to better develop our soldiers. And I think it's really important to be proficient in your job. So I think yes.
Cool. Okay, last section is corporate email sign-offs. Are these appropriate in the military? Okay. Sincerely, J.
Yes.
Best, J.
Yes.
Well, let me ask, what sign off do you usually use?
So there's a very common one in the military. It's actually probably not common in corporate, but it's very respectfully. And because it's so common in military, people usually go V/R.
Huh.
Yeah.
I feel like it's not very respectful to shorten very respectful.
I don't know how it came to very respectfully, and then V/R, sometimes just VR, but yeah, it's a thing.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
That's like a fun tidbit.
Yeah.
Okay. What if you just signed it with your initial J?
I think if it's an email to someone who, is higher in the chain of command, then you don't want to do that. Your full signature block. But if it's someone that maybe one of your direct reports, and you can just sign with your initials, that's fine.
Yours faithfully.
I haven't seen that one in the military.
Would you use it?
Would I use it? Probably not. I think I would stick to the VR.
What about looking forward to your reply?
I feel like that's passive aggressive, so I'm going to use it.
Warm regards.
I think that one's acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sending virtual hugs.
No.
Thanks in advance.
I think that's fine.
You do?
Yeah.
Isn't that also kind of passive aggressive?
Yes, but probably less so than looking forward to your reply.
And the last one is keep slaying.
Not acceptable.
Yeah.
I don't think I would use that one though.
Okay. Awesome.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is the first video in a series of content that I'm making about my MBA experiences. I'm also interviewing a bunch of my classmates, and I'm excited to share their stories with you over the next several weeks. Follow me on the socials and subscribe to my YouTube. Keep up with more of my content.